The Loop.
The Loop. You have the divine spark. The Loop.
Do or do not. There is no try.
The Loop.
Give me your board.
Hey there, this is Misha, and welcome to episode number 8 of The Loop. Today's conversation was actually not initially intended to be a podcast. I was interviewing our guest Pavel for something else, actually a short ebook project that I'm working on, but we had a lot of interesting things come out of that conversation, so I just decided to obviously record it and just post it as a podcast episode. So it's a little bit short. It's about 30 minutes, but still really insightful. And the conversation is with Pavel Latif, who is currently a technical program manager at Google. And before that, he was also a software developer and project manager at Ericsson for, I think, almost 8 years. So he's got quite a bit of experience, relatively new at Google, but has been through this process, this interview process, obviously himself. So it's very fresh on his mind. And our conversation today was about a few different topics around the job application and the interview process at Google. So he shared some really specific advice on what to do on your resume, your CV, like what kind of things will attract the attention of a Google recruiter versus faux pas and what you should definitely not write on there. So some really practical tips around that. And then we also talk about other sort of advice around the actual interview, more general advice that's not specific to technical program managers, but anyone listening to this that is interested to work at Google, apply for a role at Google, I think will get some benefit. So without further ado, let's jump into the conversation. Okay, so yeah, I know you've only been there for like a year now, right?
About 10 months.
About 10 months. Cool. I've got a few questions. Like, first is just about the transition in terms of both the interview process and also the work style. So your interview at Ericsson, still like a tech company, but very different type of tech company. Do you remember the interview process there? And if so, like, how is it different than Google?
Yeah, I do. So there's a difference between the interview at Ericsson and interview at Google. When I joined Ericsson, I joined as a software engineer. So I was interviewed for that particular role, especially in the R&D, the R&D focus. So it was a bit intense over there because I was in a global leadership program for R&D engineers. So it also took a long time for me to complete the whole process. It was about 4 or 5 months long, and about 8 interviews later, I got in. For Google, it's a TPM role, and
So
it also
technical
took
project manager or program or
program manager.
Technical program manager.
Yeah. So technical program manager, it's quite different. What I learned after joining here is the way we run projects at Ericsson is very conventional project management. At Google is quite the opposite, because at Google the engineers have a lot more autonomy, and even the program managers have a lot more autonomy. So if I want to put it in a very short form, at Ericsson planning happens top down, and at Google it's bottom up. So the interview focuses that way. So when I transitioned from software engineer to project manager or program manager at Ericsson, I had to mainly focus on leadership, right? More soft skills. But when I interviewed at Google, it was more technical with some soft skill. So I had to still write codes. I have to still do the systems design during the interview. And the interviewers are like me, who had been in the field for a while, and they were asking me those questions, which is quite different from. And at Ericsson, I was in the hiring committee. I interviewed lots of people at Ericsson for both software engineering and project management. So I can tell it's quite different, the process is.
So just a little more detail on that. So you said that the process at Ericsson was actually quite long.
Just for my case, but normally no.
Normally it's just like a few interviews, like 4 or 5, or
Normally, so if I just talk about normal interview process of a project manager or a program manager at
Mhm.
Ericsson in the organization that I was working on. So first, there is an interview with the HR or recruiter.
Mhm.
Then the second interview is with hiring manager.
Mhm.
And if this two goes well, then the third interview is with someone from the team, either team lead or some senior engineer or senior program manager from the team.
Mhm.
Sometimes it could be group interview, and depending on job stage,
Mhm.
if it's early in the career, probably these 2 or 3 interviews are enough. If
Yeah.
it's later in the career, like job stage 7 or 8, then you
Yeah.
probably would you would run into an interview with VP.
Got it. Okay. Okay. And then in terms of like the difficulty, I know you were interviewing for different roles when you went to Google, but just in terms of the like what they were looking for, because I know obviously Google has the GCA and Googliness and all these things, so it's quite structured. Did you have like was it similar? Were you looking at sort of similar things there? Was it as structured at Ericsson, or how different was it in terms of like from the interviewer perspective?
Yeah. So I don't think it's similar in a sense. So since I was an interviewer and
Mhm.
I sat through a lot of interview boards at Ericsson, over there we were looking into, okay, first of all, the team that we were hiring for requires you many years of experience. So less than 10 or 15 years of experience in project management, then do not consider those people for the roles of
Mhm.
project manager or program manager. So over there, we are looking at their craft. How do they, what do they know about project management A to Z, and how do they run it? And
Mhm.
we are looking at many soft skills. How are they able to navigate through ambiguity?
Mhm.
How they are able to communicate, right?
Mhm.
When I applied to Google, the interview process was more towards actual technical details.
Mhm.
So when maybe the interview starts, okay, tell me about how do you run a program from A to Z. But then after we went through milestone 1 or 2, they start talking about technical details.
Mhm.
So how do you do that? How do you solve that particular technical hurdle?
Mm. Mm.
And going deep into, because it's a technical program manager role, they are going deep and trying to understand if this person actually can dive into technical details. That's the feeling that I had. And during the on-site, there are 5 interviews. Out of 5 interviews, 4 of them are purely technical for me. 2 systems design and 2 coding. Um, we never ask coding question to a program manager for Ericsson interview.
Mhm.
Like, program managers are not supposed to know, at Ericsson, they're not supposed to know how to code.
Mhm.
It's a different scenario at Google, I think.
Mm. You said it's a 4 out of 5 were technical. That's a lot. And then
Yes.
the fifth one was more like culture or
No, for fifth one was mostly program management.
uh,
How do you run a
role.
program, multiple complexity programs? So how do you work with programs which expands various organization or various companies, intercompany, external companies involvement? How
Mhm.
do you deal with those?
Got it. Got it. And I guess I mean out of those, it sounds like there's a lot of technical skills testing, which makes sense. I've heard that a lot. But where are they testing like your the GCA or the googliness, or is that like part of that process, or is that like how
So
do they do that?
So right now I am going through the prep for becoming an interviewer at Google. So in general direction, what I'm seeing is based on how the candidate replies to those questions,
Mm.
either technical or behavioral, the interviewer is supposed to take take a decision or judgment call how they are in GCA, how they are doing in
Okay.
Googliness.
Interesting.
So basically, are you able to work with this person or not?
Yeah. So it's that even if the interviews are technical, right? Even if you're talking through a system design, like designing some feature or something, it's how you're talking, how the conversation is going.
Yes,
That is the test of like, oh, okay, yeah, I could work with this person. They have good GCA. They're googly. They're like humble. They're not an asshole. Whatever. And that's like sort of an indirect, almost an indirect way. They're not asking you specific questions about being googly, right? It's just your
exactly.
response.
Exactly. How you are responding to that. Because if you think
Mm.
about it, now I'm a TPM. I do not code. I
Mm.
maybe if I have time, I can, but I do not have to code or do systems design in my day-to-day job. However, when I am in that position during interview, somebody's asking me, "Hey, how do you design this system?" Or, "Hey, how do you write code for this particular problem?" I am really out of my comfort zone. And how am I responding to it? And technical program manager is supposed to be a people person. They are the bridge between the org they are working with and the outside org. These people are supposed to understand technical details and convey it to the other teams as a spokesperson. So they are looking into those. How does a TPM perform in a position where they are unfamiliar with? So
Mm.
that's what the feel that I have
Well, it's
about this.
interesting what you just said because you got all these technical questions, but now you're not even really doing that on a daily basis, right?
Yeah, yeah. And in the end, what I talked to a few people after joining, and they are not really looking for you to ace the answer. Like
Mm-hmm.
you have, they are not looking for a perfect solution to the code, not at least for a technical program manager role.
Mm.
They are looking to see how you are approaching the problem. Definitely, if you are completely wrong, that's not good. But as long as you are close to the correct answer or in the path to finding the correct answer, it's good. It's the thought process they are looking into. In
Yeah.
fact, um, two system design interviews, I actually finished the system design, but for two coding interviews, I did not feel like we ended the or finished the experiment. We continued to discuss how can we improve the pro code more and more, right?
Mm.
How does it, how will this particular code snippet will behave in, and if we change this parameter, how will that other part will behave?
Mm-hmm.
We did not really get to the solution, but it was me working with the interviewer to get to the finish line. And
Yeah.
what I understood, in fact, I actually met up with one of my interviewer later after
Mm-hmm.
joining.
Mm-hmm.
And what I understood is, as a technical program manager, they are expecting me to not go pull up my sleeve and solve the problem. I need to be there to help the team to solve the problem,
Mm-hmm.
and how effective I am to get there or do
Mm.
that.
Mm. I see. No, that's really that's really good insight, right? Because I think yeah, having the perfect answer and just getting everything right. I mean, you're really nervous about that, right? 'Cause sometimes it feels like an
Mhm.
exam. It feels like a test, but it is a test in a way, but not
Yeah.
in the like you have to get every like answer correct. It's like there's different answers, right? There's different ways to
Yeah.
approach things, right? So cool.
But there are lots of
Yeah,
different interviewers, and I think each interviewer's perspective is different, or how do
sure.
they tackle those questions.
For sure, for sure. Okay, well, that's really insightful, man. I think that's some good interview information. Just a couple more quick questions. You have like four or 5 minutes. Is that okay?
Oh, I have time.
Okay, okay. I know you've only been there for, this is shifting gears a bit. You've only been there for like 10 months, but do you have any insight about how it's changed, how the org has changed, or how the culture has changed at all um, from before the pandemic, or like from talking, having conversations? Do you have any sense of that, or do you feel like it's changing now?
I don't know how it was. It's just people talking about the past, right?
Yeah.
So before pandemic, the culture and when it pandemic hit, I think people connected more globally.
Hmm.
Before pandemic, it was more local.
Hmm.
So everybody is working with the team locally and going to lunch and
Yeah.
having fun. And even during interview process, you go to on site and you actually have lunch with one of the Googler,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is not an interview, but part of the experience.
Yeah.
Um, Now, because of pandemic, it's everybody on GVC talking face to face over video call, and they are able to talk more with global team members and
Hmm.
have those global lunch or
Yeah.
some events.
Yeah.
And so in general, I felt like the teams think they connected more globally.
Mm.
And but I really like the culture here
Mm.
compared to where I'm coming from.
Sure.
It's
Sure.
very youthful.
Yeah. Youthful as in the
So at
spirit.
Ericsson, everything is by the book. Lots of
Mm.
process. So
Mm.
there is a process, and there is a process for the process. And like even and there's so many meetings. So usually we used to have a meeting. Before that, there is a pre-meeting, and before that, there is even another meeting. Very
Yeah.
Scandinavian
Yeah.
culture. And at least program management, everybody is above 50, or pretty much
Mm.
everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And even the engineering, most of the engineers were very experienced, been in the craft for 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
When I joined Google, there are lots of experienced and
Yeah.
senior guys there, but a lot of young people.
Mm.
So I feel like the atmosphere just changes
Yeah. For
just by
sure.
that.
For sure. Yeah. No, I mean, it's got to just having diversity, right? In age, even it's just going to be a very different culture.
Yes.
You're doing this interview training now. I don't know if you can tell me more about that. Like in terms of, in terms of the initial stage of like the screening stage. Obviously, you had a bunch of experience at Ericsson, and I think that probably helps a lot in terms of your how your resume looks like. But do you have any general or specific advice from what you've seen so far and having gone through the process on that very initial stage of I got to get the resume prepared? How much time do I spend on it? What do people miss, right? Like what do people get wrong about that?
So far, what in last 10 months, I also referred quite a few of my friends to Google, and there's a trend I'm seeing. Um, how a person writes their resume matters. So you can
Mm.
just list job descriptions in bullet points. That really doesn't tell you exactly what this person is doing. Like I can write as a project manager, I defined budget, planned A to B,
Mm.
and finished a project with this many millions of dollars, and blah blah blah. But it doesn't really convey what my skills are. It
Mhm.
could be that I'm just sitting there and everybody else doing everything. Um, doesn't tell the story whether I was a good project manager or not.
Mhm.
What I have seen my friends being successful in getting the first interview call is when they're in their resume, they tell the story. Instead of listing the job description, they say, I use this particular skill that I have to make this, which create this other impact. And this is how I measured success. 3, 4 line, very condensed, and those people are getting interview calls. And then a very experienced person with lots of job description bullet points, they are not getting an interview call. So that's my 10 months observation so far.
Can you give me an example of what that would look like? So like a specific project or a campaign or something like just like it
Yeah,
isn't it's something general. Like what does that look like?
I can tell you from one of my resume. So I have on my latest Ericsson experience, I wrote it in such a way that so I managed the program for 5G launch, 5G radio, and few other products there. But then I used the technical program management skills to negotiate headcount of 200 engineers and managed a budget of 250 million over 2 years and completed the program within 2 months of promised deadline, and which generated this much revenue after a year. So that was my resume. But I have seen other people writing this resume, survey project manager, Ericsson, from this date to that date, managed projects, um, managed budget, planned project from start to completion. Doesn't really say specific details of what they did. It's more like job description of a project manager. And I felt like those people did not get, at least the people that I referred to, they did not get the call.
Yeah, so it's really you have to have a coherent story. Like, what did you actually do? What was the impact? And that's not just something you're talking about in the interview. It's what you're putting in your resume so people can understand it. You're not just listing out stuff.
Yes, exactly.
Great.
And one of my interviewer actually told me that looking at my resume, they're able to ask me questions because it shows, it tells a story, two, 3 lines, but tells a
Hmm.
story. So Pavel did that. So Pavel, tell me about that. But many of the resumes they see, they're like job descriptions. So they are not able to extract a question right of resume. So
Hmm.
what happens in this case? They have to come up with a question which may not be relevant to your resume or your
Hmm.
experience, and then it is more difficult to answer it coherently.
Hmm.
But in my case, since they are asking me questions directly from my resume, and from one of the experience they spotted in that doc, it's just also easy for me to answer, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's super helpful. I think oftentimes what I've heard is like just the keywords matter, which is true. But then what you're saying is actually the way you're writing it is important
So
too. Yeah.
keyword, maybe it will matter um, if you are dependent on the crawler, which is crawling through all the resumes and picking up your resume. I think that's a wrong way to approach. It's not like it will not be successful, but that has less of a chance of success. The right approach would be, Google is 100 and how much? 130 or 140,000 employees there. All of these 130 or 140,000 people are able to refer. So connect to somebody on LinkedIn or some social network and ask for referral. When I got the interview at Google, that's how I got it. I actually connected with somebody at LinkedIn. Very random. I don't know. It's just this person works at Google and this person is a technical program manager. I sent him a message saying that, hey, I am interested in joining the company and this is one role I liked. Would you be interested in giving me a referral? And he was very nice and said yes. And this is not the only time that I got success. I interviewed at Amazon, I interviewed at Microsoft, quite a few companies in between. Um, some cases, companies reach out, but the companies that I want to get in, I always get referral. And when you get referral, I think crawling and keywords don't matter anymore
Because
because
you already got past that first
when
stage. Yeah.
I got past the first stage. So a sourcer contacted me saying that, hey, your referral told me you want to join, so I'm going to pass it to recruiter. So recruiter already have my resume, and with the referral, recruiter is already passing it to
Yeah.
engineering hiring manager. So now you can actually work on your resume, and your chances of success is much higher in this case.
Yeah, that's great. That's great feedback, and I think you make it sound really easy. Like,
It's
why doesn't everyone do that? They just reach out to a random person and just like ask for a referral. I mean, what like did you reach out
I
to a lot
think
of people or?
so to be honest, at Google, my success is much better. Every time I reached out back in 2018, I applied once again, and that time also, the first person I approached, they said, "Okay, I'll refer you." But for some other companies like Amazon, I had to reach out to 3, 4 people, and they see my message and doesn't reply. And in those cases, it could be discouraging, right? That, hey, this person just ghosted me.
Yeah, but eventually, I mean, some people go back.
Yeah, yes. And so since I joined Google, I am seeing few people reaching out to me for referral randomly in LinkedIn. So some referrals are they want to initiate a conversation and then ask for referral, and some are actually you can tell it's a copy paste and this person is spamming a lot of people. And I'll give you an example. So this person was looking for an internship at Google, and in February he sent me a message saying that, hey, can you give me a referral? By that time, I know summer internship, Google, everybody already chosen. So I told him, hey, you know what? If you apply now, you will not get a summer internship for sure because the time has passed. 2 months later, he sent me exactly same message, copy pasted again, and he's still looking for summer internship. The second time around, I'm not replying to him because he probably didn't even see my reply last time. So, and it's not personable. So you need to approach somebody with more personality and try to initiate a conversation. In my life, I had lots of success seeking out people for mentorship, and often those generated some of the roles that I had over the years.
Awesome, man. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Is there anything else? I mean, there's a lot of great advice in there already. Is there anything else that you would, knowing what you know now, having gone through the interview process, having been there, going through interview training, anything else that you would want to highlight that isn't maybe very obvious to someone applying for the first time?
During application, probably not, but during interview, I do have one insight, which is at Ericsson, I was job 7, which is like equivalent to L7 at Google. So there are resources online that kind of tells you what various levels expectations are at Google. So when interviewing and providing answers, the answers need to relate to those levels expectation, because interviewer are also judging you for level, and they may request L plus, L, or L minus during interview. They will give a feedback. So if somebody is looking for a good transition, they need to make sure they show or they answer in a right way to have proper level conversation, because they try to down level me, and that's how I figured out. Financially, probably it doesn't make a big impact considering Google is a high paying company, but sometimes you want to also keep your seniority.
So,
Yeah.
what you're saying is when you're answering those questions, they're looking at it also from a specific level, seniority, expertise. And if you're answering those questions as if you're a little bit less experienced or more experienced, then they're going to put you in a different category.
Yes, each interviewer will have an option to recommend if the candidate is right for this level, level up or level down. So there are three options there. Once there is a hiring recommendation, and hiring committee actually looks through all of these recommendations. If there are enough interviewer saying that this person should be L+1, then they are going to look into L+1 and probably will have follow-up interviews on that level to see if this person fits that bill.
Got it. So definitely when you're preparing for these interviews, you should be aware of the level that you're being interviewed for, and then look up, questions around that and how to answer those questions at that level.
Yeah. To be honest, I think based on what I heard from various people at Google and in various forums, Google recruiters always try to down level you during offer stage. So if you're already L+1 in interview, you probably are landing in the right spot of your expected level. But you will have a lot more negotiating power at that point. And if during interview you are not able to show the relation to your answer to the expectation in that level, I'll give an example. So L6 technical program managers are required to work with multiple different org and run a massive program on their own, right? Now, if I am interviewing and my answers are more like, hey, I can do this, and I'm kind of explaining a small project, which is a small team, it doesn't convey that I'm able to work with so many different organizations. Or even L7, I am supposed to have some reports or some junior TPMs working with me to run part of the program. If I do not show those leadership, then clearly the interviewer will not consider you for that level.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that conversation, that very practical conversation, and got some tips from Pavel on getting your resume ready, and also tips for the actual interview itself. So if you liked some of what he said, and if you like his style, then I will link back to his coaching profile where you can actually book a call with him, have a quick chat, ask him any questions you have around this topic, and he'll be happy to help you on that. As usual, if you have any questions, comments, feedback about this podcast episode or about the podcast or anything at all, then drop me an email. My contact info is in the show notes. And I am getting pretty hungry, so I'm gonna head off to lunch. All right. Have a great rest of the week, and I'll see you next time.